And welcome back to News Center. Thank you very much for staying with us. All right, so like I mentioned earlier, Kenya today joins the rest of the world in marking the day against the death penalty. The celebrations are being championed by the International Commission of Juries, the Kenya chapter, and the Kenya Human Rights Commission, together with the African Prisons Project at the Committee Prison. The forum will provide an opportunity to have discussions with the convicts on the death row and collect their input on the abolition of the death penalty here in the country. Let me now bring in my guests from the Africa Prisons Project, John Muthuri. Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
Now, it's interesting that last year at a time like this, we were here and we were discussing the same thing. Are there any successes so far with regard to abolition of the death penalty in Kenya?
I would term the successes that we've had after the last discussion that we had has been in the court, where we've had 2 inmates who've gone to court, and at this time at the Supreme Court of Kenya, and to seek the interpretation of the mandatory death sentence. And we're still waiting for the judgment on this case. But then I think it's a big step towards hearing what the highest court in this land has to say in relation to this matter.
All right. So is it really a success, or you know,
it's a progress?
It's a progressive you know, process.
Yes.
All right. What has been the main hindrance to this particular abolition of the death penalty?
As I said last time, we've seen that there is an element of pro-abolition support from the executive arm of government. In 2009, we saw the president then, Mwai Kibaki, committed 4,000 inmates who were on death row to life imprisonment. Last year again, the president, Uhuru Kenyatta, committed over 1,000 to life imprisonment, clearing the death gallows. So, and then we've seen on several occasions on the other arm, the judiciary, trying at some point to exonerate themselves from the whole matter and leave the question to the parliament. So I would say the main hindrance has been the change in law, the failure by the parliament to take this matter seriously and changing the penal code so that we can do away with death penalty in this country.
Right. And I mean, interestingly enough, why is parliament so slow to acting on this? Is it a priority to them?
Unfortunately, and as it's anchored in this year's theme, there is a correlation between poverty and death penalty. And if you look at this discussion, it's a discussion that mainly might not be touching the people in parliament. It's a discussion that touches us here on the ground. It's poor people who end up on death penalty.
But they're supposed to be representing us.
That's the truth, but often at times that does not happen, Betty. And that's why we feel like this is not taken seriously. The member of parliament who did table this bill in parliament, unfortunately, was voted out. And so there's not that much push in parliament for the bill to move ahead.
And I mean, looking at the past, and this has been going on for some time now, do you think it's an exercise in futility? Do you think at some point this will actually happen? Yes,
we are very hopeful, and we live by hope. And we've seen the same struggle in other countries. We can learn from the story of our neighbors in Uganda, who, despite all the other challenges, have been successful in court trying to abolish mandatory death sentence, and it happened in the case of Chigula and others in Uganda. So I don't think it's something that will not happen. I'm more than certain one day, even if it's not in the near future, we'll not have death penalty in our laws.
All right.
And if you look at the people who are joining the movement, the people who are speaking against death penalty, the number is increasing and the voice is louder.
All right. And I just want you to shed more light for viewers who are wondering, what crimes would warrant a death penalty?
If you look at the penal code, there are 5 offenses that warrant death penalty. 1 is administration of oath. 2 is robbery with violence. We have attempted robbery violence. We have also treason, and we have murder. Yes.
All right. What are the feelings of the families and the inmates who have been convicted and they are facing the death penalty? What are their feelings about this issue?
That's a very, very good question, and it is a question that we all need to discuss. I think the moment that we'll stop looking at this matter as a question of the paper, as a law, and we start putting a human face behind the whole discussion, is the point where we, as a community, will find our foot towards where we need to go. If you look at the paper that you're going to present this year and today in committee, we have collected stories of people who are on death row. We have collected the stories of people who have been on death row at one time. And the feeling is that you've been stripped of your life even before you die. You are like a walking zombie. You've been declared dead, and you are rendered useless. But as I said, there is hope. And if you look at the prison reforms that has been there, the people who are on death row today can participate in activities. They can study. We have students that we've sponsored to do law, and they're on death row or they've been on death row. Yeah, but the feeling from the people themselves is not very good, and it's that of being treated inhumanely and being stripped of that life that they're living today.
But also, if you look at let's even take, for example, the crime, robbery with violence.
Yes.
I mean, as much as, you're thinking about the inmates and the people who've been convicted and, punished with death penalty, there's also this other side of the victims who were aggrieved in one way or another. Maybe one person lost their lives. Maybe they got injured in the process. Maybe they lost, valuable amounts of property or money or whatever. What about them? Because they would say that, this person committed this crime against me. Why should they be having a lesser sentence or a much comfortable sentence?
Two things in regards to that question and the example of robbery with violence. One, robbery with violence in this country, the threshold is very low. That's one discussion that ought to be had on a different platform, because it ranges. It
could be a phone. I'm walking in town and somebody hits me and steals my phone.
Exactly. So there is that one discussion. But then to the main point of the victim, if you look at death penalty on its entirety as a sentence, and from the studies and the little reading that I've had, it doesn't meet the threshold of a sentence. It does not offer retribution. It does not offer rehabilitation. It does not. You read in some stories or in some articles in books, people who were witnesses and people ended up being sentenced to death, seeking for an opportunity to speak to these people, but these people are already dead. So it doesn't serve the purpose of sentencing to its full core or entirety.
All right. Yeah. Finally, I want to understand something. So the issue that the civil society has and all these groups have with the death penalty, is it because it's never carried out? It never happens? Or is it that they just have a problem with that particular punishment altogether?
Let me speak and specifically speak for African Prisons Project in this matter. Yeah. Ours is a move towards total abolition of death penalty.
Okay.
The challenging of mandatory death sentence. It doesn't matter how we glorify it. It doesn't matter how we term it. But the point is, death penalty is inhumane. It's wrong, and it should not be
in totality.
In totality.
Yes.
But there are other. We can think of other avenues. And if you look at the numbers today, 2/3 of the countries in the world have abolished death sentence. That's around 114 countries. And they have sought other mechanism to, they have the same offenses as we have. They have robbery with violence, they have murder, and they're found mitigating ways to these cases.
All right. But are there groups that, are agitating for this because this death penalty actually does not happen?
That is one of the grounds for the argument.
Right.
But then I don't think